The intent of the presentation tonight is to talk through team building with the Nittany AI challenge in particular, although this applies across the board whenever you're working in some sort of team environment. We're going to be talking about some of the tips and tricks and some of the lessons learned that we've had over the years with the Nittany AI challenge. And as I said, this also applies for other situations. In January, we're going to be doing a joint event with the entrepreneurship minor here at Penn State, the NT minor, where we're going to be talking about team formation across all the challenges at the university. For instance, the Ag Springboard Challenge, the Innovation Challenge, INC-U, a number of different opportunities that are here at the university, and they all share this common thread of building a high-performing team to be able to achieve success within any of these programs. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight very quickly. But to start off, hi, my name is Brad Zdenek. I'm the innovation strategist with the Nittany AI Alliance here at Penn State. And I have the pleasure of running this thing called the Nittany AI Challenge, which if you're here and looking at the names, most of you have heard or participated in the challenge before. I'm just going to real quick do an overview of what the challenge is before we kind of get into the team stuff. If you've heard of the challenge before, you know that it is a team challenge open for students here at Penn State, essentially to find a way to improve the world, and specifically to find a way to improve the world by using artificial intelligence. And that's one of the things that scares a lot of people. When I talk about the Nittany AI challenge, people hear those two words, AI, or the two letters AI, and they think, oh, that's not for me. I'm not a computer scientist, or I'm not a programmer. And one of the things that I try to convince everyone of and try to convey to everyone is that artificial intelligence is a technology that is going to impact everyone. It doesn't matter what field you're in. It doesn't matter what domain you go into. It doesn't matter what job you're going to have. You, in some way, are probably going to use artificial intelligence in your day-to-day life. So if we at Penn State are graduating you without some sort of exposure to AI, we're doing you a disservice. And that's what we're trying to do in the Nittany AI Challenge, is to provide everyone, regardless of your area of expertise, everyone a chance to experience, understand, and work with artificial intelligence. And that includes numbers of people with different skill sets coming together to work on a team. Specifically, you're going to be working on a team to build a solution to one of the world's problems. We last year made a change in the challenge to shift a focus from just improving education and improving Penn State to improving the world in 4 domains: health, education, the environment, and humanitarianism. And essentially, you compete over a course of an 8-month period for a prize pool of $50,000. This challenge is open only to Penn State students, graduate and undergraduate. And essentially, the only requirement is that you are an enrolled student as of January 29th, 2021. It doesn't matter when you graduate. As long as you are a student on that date, you're good to go for the challenge. The challenge, as I said, runs over the course of 8 months. We're not going to get into the details of all of this. But for today, basically, you just need to understand that we're in that first phase that you see on the timeline there. We're in the idea phase right now, where a number of individuals across the university are starting to come up with ideas for things that they'd like to do to improve the world. And those ideas are starting to germinate, are starting to form. And basically, these teams are going to come together and write proposals that will be submitted to me by January 29th. And on January 29th, I will send those proposals out for review, and we will pick 20 of those teams to move forward and build prototypes of their ideas. Bring that idea to life. And we also give you a little bit of money to encourage you at that point, a little bit more money later on. And at the end, there's a big pool of $25,000 that you can win some money from. To give you a sense, in the past, most of our winning teams, the teams that make it to the end and win money at the final phase, win between $7,000 and $20,000 across the course of the challenge, all told. So it's a great opportunity to get some funding to bring your idea to life, to make an impact on the world. But most importantly, it is a great opportunity to build your skill set and develop your resume, your CV, to be able to get the great job that you want down the road. I make no illusions that our teams are all going to go on and start startups and change the world and have this next great $100 million acquisition. Um, that's not the case for most of us. But for most of us, we are going to go on to careers. And to get a leg up in those careers, to get the job you want, having artificial intelligence and experience with it on your resume is critical, as well as experience actually applying this type of technology. And that again means that you don't necessarily need to be a computer scientist. You don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be a coder. You don't need to be proficient in Python. What you do need to do is you need to be able to think innovatively, and you need to be able to work together on a diverse team, moving that team from an idea through a prototype to a minimal viable product. Even if you do not write a single line of code throughout that process, companies look at you and think, that's the individual I want, because that's what the real working world is like. You take ideas and bring them to fruition, and they want to know that you can work on a team to achieve that. Those skill sets can come from other people for doing the coding, or you can be that coder and they can know that you can actually bring something that is an idea and bring it to reality through the application of your skill sets. The quote I have up here is from a company called Tech Systems, which hires out individuals with technical skills and expertise to companies on kind of a temporary basis. But the CEO, head of Tech Systems, had a long interview where he's talking about where he sees the skill gaps in the industry. And one of the things that he identified was, look, we've got plenty of people with discrete skill sets, with technical skill sets. That's all fine. They could be proficient coders. But where we're missing the skills that people are lacking when they come out of college is the ability to take those technical skill sets and apply them and understand how to apply them within a team context. And that's what the challenge is about building that team and working with that team to bring your idea to reality. So what does the team look like? That's what we're here to talk about tonight, and to talk through some of the experiences that our teams have had in the past, and some of the things that have led our most successful teams to being successful. And a lot of it has to do with two things, and I've done two different webinars, one on each of these topics. Number one, we're talking about tonight building your team, and second, validating your idea. Teams that do those two things are generally extremely successful throughout the Nittany AI challenge. And they're the ones that make it all the way to the end and end up winning the big dollars toward the end of it all. So as far as roles go, one of the roles that a lot of people don't think about is a designer. But we have found that this has been the secret sauce for our most successful teams over the years. It has not been the technical person. It has not been the data scientist. We have had teams with tremendous data scientists on them, just absolutely amazing individuals. But those teams lacked someone on the design side, and those teams struggled. However, we have had some teams with individuals who learned AI on the fly, who learned their skill sets for applying artificial intelligence and creating algorithms during the challenge itself by cobbling together YouTube videos and talking with experts from our partnering companies and taking those things. And so they didn't not have this great data scientist skill set, but paired up with a strong designer and a few other people we'll talk about in a second, those teams have found great success. My best story for this is the top team, not for the 2020 Nittany AI Challenge, but for both the 2019 and the 2018 Nittany AI Challenge. Both years, the team was led by an individual who is from the College of Arts and Architecture. She was a designer by education and trade. And She was the individual who helped to lead the teams both of those years. In 2018, she was a member of, I think she was one of 7 members on the team. It was a larger team. They found great success. In fact, I often point out how during the review of their submission that year, which was called Lion Planner, um, we had a representative from Google there, and he raised his hand after they presented and had shown off what their minimal viable product, and said to this crowd, "I'm from Google. I have seen at least 15 submissions that have come through Google that do what you just tried to do. And this is the best looking and best designed one I have ever seen." Now, can you imagine standing up on a stage with the lights and the microphone and all that sort of stuff, and having the seasoned individual from Google lauding your work like that? The reason that they ended up winning $20,000 at the finals that year, in addition to their $2,000 that they had already won, the reason they won that money was because they had taken a great idea, and yes, they had the technical competence to build it, but they designed it for the end user. The user experience that was thought through the entire project is what raised them from a submission to something that resonated with the audience and with the reviewers and with us. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of finding somebody with a design eye for your team. Now, this could be somebody who's in a technical field like IST, who does user experience design, or this could be somebody with a more artistic eye, as in the examples I gave you a few minutes ago. But a designer is critical. We'll talk in a few minutes about how you can find those people. Coupled with this design lead is a technical lead. Now, everything I've said so far has made it sound like I'm downplaying the role of the technical person on the team or technical people on the team. I don't mean to do that, because the technical individuals on the team are the backbone. In the end, for the Nittany AI challenge, you are building a real solution. You are taking an idea and building a prototype and building a minimal viable product. You cannot do that without a technical skill set. However, this is not a technical challenge. Let me repeat that. This is not a technical challenge. This is a challenge about applying a technology. And there's a difference there. There's a distinction. The technical leads are part of a team. If this was all about cutting edge, bleeding edge artificial intelligence, we'd get rid of all these other team members and we'd say you need a strong technical team, and that's it. But this is not. This is about application of a technology, specifically AI, machine learning. Technical lead is extremely important, but that is one component of a well-rounded team. Generally, what I've seen is the technical side is the first part of a team that forms. And it seems to be one of the easiest groups to put together for the teams or subsets of teams. So what else do you need? Well, you need somebody to bring these people together. You need a team lead. This could be an individual from, say, business, who understands what project management is, knows how to motivate individuals, knows how to get them working, knows how to make certain that they're meeting deadlines and how to set deadlines, and how to use things like Trello or Microsoft Project or things of that sort to lay out what do we have to do and when do we have to have it done by. These individuals are extremely important, even though they may not write a single line of code, they may not design a single thing. A person with a team lead role is extremely important. I'm going to circle back to that in just a second. But first, the last kind of component that we've seen to the most successful teams is an individual who's in charge of communication. Now, sometimes I frame this as the marketing lead. Sometimes I frame this as the presentation lead. But essentially what it is it is an individual who is capable of essentially conveying the idea to a general audience. Because unfortunately, you can have the greatest idea in the world, you can develop the greatest MVP in the world, but if you cannot convey it to other people, if you can't get them excited about the thing that you've done, you're in trouble. So having that communication lead is critical. Now, what I do want to point out is this. Notice that I say roles and not people on this. This is not a situation where I am saying you need a 5-person or a 4-person team. Here are the 4 people you need: a designer, a team lead, a technical lead, and a communication lead. What I am saying is that you need people that can fill all these roles. Maybe you have one extremely talented individual who can do all of these things. Now, there may be some time management issues there because it's difficult to accomplish all of this, but you could have one person. We have had an extremely successful 2-person team. That team, second year, 2019, team led by the designer was 2 people, the coder and the designer. And that was the entire team, and they were extremely successful. I think they won $17,000 our second year. So these are roles. You might take 9 people to create these 4 roles. You might need 2 people for all 4 of these roles. But in the end, these are the roles that you have to make certain are filled on your team. So one of the problems that everyone runs into is, how do I do that? I don't know a designer, or okay, I've got a technical lead and I've got someone who knows UX, but where do I find a communication person from? I don't know anybody in the College of Com. I don't know anybody in business. Well, that's something we tried to solve for you. So we created a tool. It is at nittanyai.psu.edu/teams. And I just put it in the chat for you, so you can click on that and go right to it. The Teams tool is essentially a way for you to find individuals that have these various skill sets. And when you go to the tool, the first thing that you will do is create a profile. And that profile will identify what your skill sets are. Then you will go in and you will post your idea. What is the thing that you want to create? You don't have to have it fully fleshed out yet, but what's the idea? Let's say, for instance, you want to use unmanned aerial vehicles to identify areas at risk for fires, for wildfires. Or let's say you want to optimize the delivery of foodstuffs in a flood zone. Whatever your idea is, you go in and you kind of frame it out. And then you say, here are the people I need. I've got a designer, I've got a technical person, but I need a communications person, and I need a project manager. So you click those things and you put that in, and you say, those are the individuals I need. And then the tool will do its work. And what the tool will do is it will connect you up with the individuals that have those skill sets and put those skill sets in. I highly recommend that you go into the Teams tool as early as possible. And I will also tell you that unlike every other year, this year it is required that you use the Teams tool. In fact, your ideas will be submitted through it this year. So it's better to get in there early and put your information in.
Yes, hi. Thanks for the presentation and all the insights. So as you can see, my name is Savita, and I was wondering what the time commitment to, for any of these projects is. Like, I know you are all probably undergrads, right? Or you were undergrads?
Yeah, I began in the challenge as a freshman and I'm now a sophomore.
I'm the same as Tanish. Began as a freshman, ended up as a sophomore.
Okay. So given your workload, what was your time commitment to this? And how often did you guys meet?
Yeah, good question. So it was a bit different because from January to March, I would say we were meeting, a couple times a week for, 1 to 2 hours. And if we had sub-team meetings, those would also be 1 to 2 hours. So I would say we had 3 weekly meetings. And then when everything went virtual, I think we kept the same organization and we did the same thing throughout the summer, actually, until we submitted the MVP in September. So from January to September, it's gonna be a lot of time, but it was definitely all worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, time commitment, considering the meetings, was pretty consistent, maybe like 1 hour, 2 hour tops each week. I say generally for every team it varies, but I guess in the early stages of the project, we had like team meetings, but then our team leader would assign like small homework for each role or each person in the group to do, just a little thing to help contribute to, you know, the due dates in the project that usually occur in the earlier stages. Over the summer, we really, in the technical aspect, ramped up production because we were all doing it virtual, and we were starting to really get into the nitty gritty of the project. And we were like post MVP, we had an MVP going, but we really wanted to build and flesh it out for the judging events that would occur later. And then we were also planning, because of our idea and how the team morale was at that point in time, we were also kind of, the team mentality was also like, hey, regardless of what we do in the end of the competition, we want to bring this product forward and pass the due date regardless. So we're just gonna keep adding features as if theoretically speaking, the competition didn't exist. So, and with that mentality, we really got through a lot of features. Like I surprised myself about with the amount of features that we added towards the end of the product. So yeah.
That's pretty cool. I was curious, how did you guys come up with your project name, Nian Sapo?
Yeah, so I also see the question in the chat, so I'll try to answer both at the same time. So I was the presentation lead, and I met the team lead. His name is Edward Amoa. We were working on a research project together, and we actually became friends very quickly. And so one day he invited me to dinner, and he told me about this idea for a project which eventually became Neon Sapo. And he told me that his dream was to make sure that everybody had an equal opportunity for education. And what he wanted to focus on specifically was literacy and how we could use technology to help kids who don't have the chances to become literate. And so to answer the question in the chat as well, Neon Sapo means wisdom, by the way. And to answer the question in the chat, I think you will know which idea to follow when it's the one that you feel the most passionate about. So when you have an idea and you start following it and you just become more and more engaged with it and it really lights a fire under you, I think that's the idea that you should pursue, because this thing is at the longest it can be is a 9-month commitment, and that's just for the challenge. See, like I'm working on Neon Sapo outside of the challenge as part of the HESI program. So it's become, a much longer experience for me. And I really love that. And the reason I love it is because it's an idea that I'm extremely passionate about. So that's the one, if I could boil it down to one thing, tell you.
Yeah, and one other thing, Nyan Sapo specifically means wisdom knot. And my personal background with the project was actually coincidental. I stumbled upon Nyan Sapo almost by just mere coincidence, because in the first day of my Math 220 class, I met Tanish just out waiting outside because our teacher had come late. And we started talking, and he told me about Nyan Sapo, and I got more and more interested. And just from that mere coincidence, I joined the team. I really got inspired by what the idea was. It was still a newborn baby at the time, but just knowing from my past experience with just general projects, what the idea was, I really had belief, faith, and confidence in our team leader and in Tanish with the idea, and the rest is history.
Joel, seemed like you had some input.
Yeah, I want to throw something in regarding the question that was in the chat, which I'll just read it for the benefit. That how does one feel confident about the one idea, what clicks, and when you know that's the one you should proceed with. So I'm going to talk about this from a kind of different perspective, specifically in like the startup realm. Over the past year, even outside of the challenge, I've kind of struggled with that same thing. Like, how do you know what to grab onto? I mean, our company has had like 3 huge pivots in 3 months, which is not typically a good thing, but the one thing from a more analytical perspective, I agree 100% with what Tanish said about how, it's important to be passionate about what you're working on. And you'll know, when you'll know. But from a more analytical perspective, the one thing that really assisted us was going through each idea. Say you have 3 ideas that you're happy with. If you go through those 3 ideas and bring together the assumptions that you're making for each of them, and then do your best to validate those assumptions. So it may be, say your idea is that, I don't know, it's meant for a specific audience. Well, I'll just take Riddick and Tanish, I'll just take yours. So one of your assumptions was that, there is poor literacy education in the area that you were working on. And of course, that's very easy to validate. That's kind of common knowledge. But if you come to a point where one of your ideas, you can't validate the assumptions that you're making based on that idea, well, that might not be one that you click with, and it'll be easier to find it out then after. It will be much easier, less time consuming, and a lot less painful if you find it out before you start. Versus when you are, you get to July and you have to make an MVP, you have to build this whole thing on something that wouldn't even work anyways. So it's important to have both sides of that. Definitely do something that you're passionate in, but make sure it is, I would say there's kind of like 3 pillars to it. It has to be feasible, interpretable, and have a value proposition. And if you can meet all 3 of those things and be passionate about it, there's your idea.
So I'll jump in just to put a bow on this, because you're all correct, and it's more of a pathway. So 100%, I am a deep believer in starting with why. You've got to do something that you understand why you're doing it and has meaning to you, because you have to be able to persist throughout the entire competition and wanting to work on this thing. However, you can want to work on something that's of no value to anybody. And that's also not good. So you do have to validate that idea. Operationally, how do you do that? Well, I put into the chat a link to some of our list of upcoming events. We hold ideations and we hold events during which we invite in people who are working in the space of health, humanitarianism, education, the environment, and we ask them, what are your problems? What are the things you're running into on a daily basis? And those people, those boots on the ground, those people who are involved daily in these issues will tell you what some of their problems are. And then what you have to do is find that match between your passion, your why, and what those expressed needs are. And if you can find something in that sweet spot of that intersection, then you've got an idea. Now you've got something to run with. Now, I know we're a little bit over time, but we've got some good conversation going here, so I'm not going to cut us off. If you do have to go, all this is recorded. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel. But I'm curious of any other potential questions we have. I did see, thank you for doing the HESI link. HESI is a wonderful program run by John Gershenson here at the university. It focuses in on kind of this same focus area that we're focused in, just with a different kind of program, but they meld together really, really well between what the Nittany AI Challenge does and what he does within HESI. So we've got a very nice partnership there. Sorry, just reading the questions. Okay, perfect. Any other questions for kind of how all of this runs and what we do, and on the particularly related to how to build a team and find team members?
There's a question in the chat, Brad,
Okay.
regarding the categories. I can list 3 of them, but I'm sure you can rattle them all
Yep.
off.
I will put it in, and I hear a microphone on, so I don't know if somebody's got a question that they
Sorry.
wanted to ask while I'm typing.
Yeah, it's me again. I just wanted to wait till anyone else had a question before jumping in again. I know you guys mentioned that you have varying backgrounds, but is it mostly in engineering, or are you in social sciences? And well, I did mention that, I have a mostly IT background, but not engineering. So I was wondering how strong of, an engineering background, or, yeah, I do see the different categories here. Uh, how strong of a background in engineering should you have, or does it not matter? I thought I remember one of you guys mentioning that it didn't matter, because I know design folks, they have a different perspective. So what is the strength of the technical talent that you're looking at? How deep should your knowledge be before you even think about venturing into this?
I don't think I've ever worked on a team that I wasn't the only developer on. So I, I I feel like there always has to be one I think engineer or someone who can do that sort of IT thing. But realistically, in terms of producing a product, development is probably the easiest part. Just in and of itself, just writing the code. I mean, I thought that was the easiest part of what we did. I guess I'm a little biased in that. But I think the most difficult and most time consuming for sure part of the challenge, at least in my experience, was creating everything that led up to the development and getting these ideas together and doing all this validation and collecting all this data and doing stuff like that. That I felt great when they just left me alone to code. So to sum that all up, I mean, there's got to be someone that can do it. But in terms of team structure, as long as there's one, moderately, competent developer on the team, that can be enough. I know I'm sure that other teams had more developers, but it's definitely possible even with just one. The more would definitely make that developer's life a little easier.
And I will say that there is a lot of on-the-job training that happens. Google's your friend, and we have had many very successful teams in the past who have started out with really basic knowledge. Knew a little bit of Python, maybe, had done no data science before, didn't know what the AI tools were that were available to them, had never cracked open Keras or Scikit or anything, or PyTorch, hadn't touched any of those things and learned it all during the process of the challenge. So even those individuals who are on the technical side of your team don't necessarily definitely don't need to be AI experts. And I want to answer the question that's in the chat as part of this. The question was, do you feel that undergrads have a bigger challenge compared to graduate students, given the skills needed? I have actually found over the last 4 years dealing or interacting with a number of teams that it's been the opposite. Graduate students have struggled much more than undergraduate students in this. In the first 2 years of the challenge, we also allowed faculty and staff, individuals who were just faculty or just staff, to participate. And they also struggled more so than undergraduate students. And there are a few reasons, and I've got a few hypotheses as to why that is. Part of it is, again, this is not strictly a technology challenge. This is not about what is the cutting edge AI. This isn't about breaking new ground in machine learning. This is about taking the affordances of these tools that are out there now and applying them. And very often these tools are relatively easy to access and easy to wrap your head around. AI has come a long way in the last 5 years, let alone last 10 years. And the user interfaces and the usability of these tools have developed tremendously. So even an individual who has, an IST or a comp sci background can figure this out. And what we've found is that undergraduates tend to have a little bit more motivation to learn those new skills and to do things the way that are necessary for the tool and for the end user, rather than trying to fit what they're doing within a predefined research area that they're in. Yes, Savitha, I believe you have another question?
Yeah, well, so you did mention that you had some teams in the past with staff members. And so is that something that they came up with the idea, or did they just jump in on the bandwagon and join a team?
Yeah, so for the first 2 years, we allowed faculty and staff and students to all compete. Uh, but after that second year, due to some concerns with intellectual property and things got a little bit confusing there, we limited the competition to direct participation only to students. But now what we have is we have staff and faculty serving as subject matter experts, advisors and mentors for teams. Those individuals who know the problems intimately and help to guide the teams in their development efforts. So yes, in those first 2 years, the staff and faculty were bringing the ideas to the table. They were originating the teams, but now they help out our student teams in making certain they're focused on the right things and the things that are actually going to have an impact.
Okay. So if I wear a grad student hat, then I should be able to do this.
Yes. Yeah, as long as you are an enrolled student as of January 29th, 2021, you are eligible to participate in the challenge, regardless of what other role you might have at the university.
Okay. Yeah, my main concern, that's why, I had the question about time, because you work all day and then you study all, evening. So
Yeah.
it becomes a challenge and with the family. So
Yeah, and that's where, again, having the right team can make a huge difference. So if you feel like you would be short on time for a team, but you still have an idea that you'd like to see come to fruition, then maybe it's building up a team that would have some more of that discretionary time and taking on more of a team leader role rather than the developer side of things. And it might be able to reduce your time commitment slightly.
I've got one perspective. What we have tonight is we've got an expert joining us who is a student here at the university. Joel has joined us, and Joel is the president for the Nittany AI Student Society, and he's going to be talking about some of his tips and tricks that he experienced in his time in the Nittany AI Challenge. Because not only is he the president of the Nittany AI Student Society, but he's also the team lead of one of our teams from last year that competed in the challenge, the insurance compatibility assistant. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that he just got a job as the advanced applications engineering analysis analyst at Accenture. So kudos to you, Joel. I had to give you a shout out there. So
Thank
with
you, Brad.
that, I'll let Joel take it over. And Joel, you can give a couple of your tips and tricks and things that you thought were really important in the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. To that point, I wanted to bring out one of the points that you had made earlier, Brad, about how the application of AI is so important, even more so a lot than the technical components of it. When I was interviewing for the job at Accenture, they hired me, as an advanced application engineer, and they have never seen a line of code that I've ever written. And they won't until my first day, or probably not even then. But so much of it, the entire interview for it was to present come up with a problem and present a solution using one of 3 advanced technological pillars, one of which was artificial intelligence. And that was how they judged talent, was just the ability to talk about these advanced applications of technology. In this case, it would be artificial intelligence. Be able to identify a problem that is, being faced in the world, especially, for the challenge, it would be the 4 pillars, and then to come up with a solution. So I thought that was so interesting when I saw that quote by Tech Systems. It took me back to that very nervous Zoom call that I had. Yeah, so as far as team roles, or as far as building a team goes, as Brad mentioned, I was part of the Nittany AI Challenge for the last 2 years. Last year was our only successful run, but I worked primarily as the team lead type technical lead, and our team, the way that I always go about putting teams together, and I've had a lot of success for it, both in the challenge and in the startup field, and even in classes and stuff, is just surrounding myself with as many people, as many smart people as I can. I think back to when we first came up with the idea for our challenge project last semester. We all just got into we got one of those conference rooms at in the chemical engineering building, because one of our members had the swipe access, and we were just sitting there for 2 or 3 hours talking about just various ideas that came up. And what would happen is an idea would come up from a different idea, and then we talked through it and we realized it didn't make sense, and we had all these weird drawings on the whiteboard and stuff. But the thing is, if you can surround yourself with a lot of smart people, a lot of the pieces start to fall into place. The team tool is a fantastic way to do that, especially now where it's a little less conducive to just meeting people organically on campus, especially with the in the Zoom climate. But if you can surround yourself with as many, I'll go one step farther, not only smart people, but capable people as well. You will be successful almost always. I think one of the important components to know, a lot of people, when they go into this, think that they need to round up 4, 5, 6 developers and to put on a team because, oh, this is a monolithic application. You have a big idea. I have never worked on a team where I was not in this context. I've never worked on a team that I was not the only developer, and I'm no prodigy. I'm not that good at development that I'm I'm doing the work of 5 different people. But I think if you can find 1, 2 technical people, maybe one of them is yourself, that will be more than enough to accomplish, especially this challenge, and get to the the MVP and the prototype stage. That will be sufficient. A lot of times people just love to throw developers at problems. I mean, this happens a lot in companies where they just throw developers at problems. And I always think of the phrase, what 1 developer can do in an hour, 2 developers can do in 2 hours. So that is something important that I've taken away. I echo Brad's sentiment as well on the design person being or the design role being so important. I think that's probably why we lost, why we eventually were, it was one thing that we definitely had a ton of room for improvement for in the challenge submission that we made last year. And looking back, that is definitely something that I would have prioritized differently. It's incredibly important. I know if you come from an engineering background like I do, the graphic designers, engineers don't think of them on the same level as themselves. Though a lot of times engineers don't think about anybody on the same level as themselves, but it's incredibly important to have them there, to have them involved, because at the end of the day, it does not matter how many lines of code you write on the back end. It does not matter. A lot of the times, it doesn't even matter how well it works. What matters to the person that judges it, which hasn't written every line, which can't possibly look at every line of code, what matters to them is going to be what they see. Is that the absolute, is that a true measure of how valuable, or of how great your solution is on the AI side? It doesn't matter because that is all, or that is one of the key components that all these solutions are judged on.
And let me just put a fine point on that, because this is not a technology challenge. This is an application challenge. And you cannot apply something well if the end user cannot use it, if it does not meet the need that they have. And so, part of the competition is figuring out what that need is and what the end user needs. But the other part of it is actually building that thing. And unfortunately, most computer scientists have not been trained in that side of things, in figuring out exactly what the customer needs and what an end user needs. They know how to do it, but they don't necessarily know what to do. And so it becomes very, very important to have that individual with that skill set on it. An anecdote on this that drives this point home. For the first 2 years of the Nittany AI Challenge, we allowed faculty and staff to compete on the same level that students did. Every single year, undergraduate students outperformed graduate students and faculty. And I'm talking seasoned faculty, like tenured, long-term, full professor faculty, outperformed those individuals in the challenge. Why? Because they had tremendous technical skill sets, but they did not build a team that had diversity of skill sets. And so the undergraduate students who did have that were able to outperform them. So with that, thank you, Joel. Let me just ask if there are any questions real quick, and you can turn on your mics. I activated the mics. Do you have any questions for us, or for either one of us, things that we might be able to help with or clear up for you? Or if you're not comfortable turning on your mic, you can put it in the chat.
Thank you, Brad and Joe.
Yeah.
So I got two questions. The first one is, when you try to build up a team, form a team, and recruit team members, so you mentioned there's a name called team tools.
Yeah, the team tool.
The team tools, right? So the team tools functions by sign up a team on Nittany AI Challenge webpage, right?
Yep.
And someone who is interested will contact you.
So the team tool will actually facilitate the connection for you. And when you log into it, it will recommend individuals for your, so depending on which side you're on. If you're an individual who has gone in and you've framed an idea and you identified what skills you need, when you log into the tool, it will say, hey, here are 5 people on the tool that you might want to reach out to because they have the skill sets you asked for. Or if you're an individual who has the skill sets, but you did not put in an idea, it will say, hey, here are 2 ideas that have been submitted and they're looking for somebody with your skill sets. Do you want to connect with them? And then through the tool, you can click on connect and you can communicate with each other through the tool.
I see the function. Thank you.
Yep.
My second question is that when you mentioned the software design, so actually what you are talking about, the functions of your software, its connections to the real demand in your customers, right? It's not about software, the beauty or any other things, right?
Yeah, it's not about some groundbreaking application of artificial intelligence or some new and amazing algorithm. It's about leveraging the power of the tools to do something really well. So one of the examples I often give, because everybody gives chatbots a hard time because chatbots are, oh, that's AI, it's really basic application of artificial intelligence, natural language understanding in particular, maybe sentiment analysis. But depending on the problem, a well-designed chatbot might be exactly what that customer or that end user needs. I don't want to frame it as customer because everybody thinks that's businessy, but what that end user needs. Maybe a chatbot is exactly what they need, and anything more than that would be distracting. A good example of that was a team last year, and they may actually submit again this year because they had to back out due to some business issues because they're starting a business as well. But the team was facilitating the buying and selling of market goods, of farm goods in rural Africa. Because there's this whole thing with middlemen and they jack up the prices, but all those middle people do is connect the farmer with the person at the market, and they needed to connect those people directly and pull out the middleman. This was in an area where there wasn't much technology, and they had to do everything through text on their SMS on their cell phones because that's the technology they had available. So what they did was they built a great chatbot that worked through SMS that did exactly what they needed. They didn't need to do more than that because that's what the end user needed. That was a great solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a very similar thing happen in the project we did over the summer with Accenture, in that we ended up the the project started with just, we're going to benefit the city of Philadelphia using AI somehow. And by the time the COVID hit in the meantime, so we ended up doing a project to improve Philadelphia's public transit agency and their response to that. And originally when we were talking about what the model, we did it by predicting long-term teleworking, so who would be using the trains and who wouldn't. When we first talked about that model in our internal meeting, we were thinking neural network, deep learning on census data. But what we ended up making was a mild implementation of an artificial intelligence algorithm that came from a Python library, using all sorts of U.S. Census data. It was really closer to being a statistical model than it was AI. But the thing is, if why use a sword to cut your steak? Use a steak knife. I always think, and one other thing to that point, I know John Dukewich from the Alliance. I've heard him say it multiple times now. He heard one of the guys from IBM who works on Watson say, I've never seen a neural network in production. Now, there's nothing wrong with neural networks. They're fantastic. They're really cool what they can do. But if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. And the design component is really what sets everybody apart, as opposed to the incredible implementation of technology as Brad was talking about.
And that wasn't just anybody at IBM. That was a distinguished engineer who leads their entire Watson AI platform.
He had enough job security to make the comment that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
I have a question about the specifics of the proposal. Just how detailed does the idea have to be? Because you had mentioned, just helping Philadelphia in some way with AI. So is it somewhat broad or is it more specific?
Sure. The answer is not very specific at all. You are extremely limited on purpose in the proposal. And while I'm talking, I'm going to get a link for you and throw it into the chat, because the proposal, all the details for it are fully laid out on the website. But essentially, you've got 4 things that you need to tell me. You need to tell me what's the problem you want to solve. You have to tell me, why is it a problem? You need to tell me what's your solution, essentially. How are you going to address that problem you just convinced me is there? And then finally, how are you going to use AI? This is not like heavily technical. How are you going to use AI? This is through a combination of chatbots and sentiment analysis, I will create an app that connects producers with sellers, along those lines. Each one of the sections is limited to 200 words. That is not much at all. And in fact, and I just put the link of the details for the proposal in the chat. One of the things that teams struggle with most, and this is where that communications person comes in, is being able to convey their idea in that little space.
Great, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? I know we're already over time, but I want to make certain you have an opportunity if you have questions. All right. Well, I just put my email in the chat. I would highly recommend that you think about reaching out to me, and we can discuss any ideas that you have right now, and I can help you to refine those ideas and to connect up with the resources you need. I would be remiss if I did not also point out that you need those individuals that I've already described on your team, but there is an extra person or people that I did not mention because they're not necessarily on your team, but they're also critical for your success, which is your subject matter experts. And your subject matter experts are the people that are not necessarily students, but they're the people who know the problem. So when I was given the example of connecting growers and sellers in rural Africa, and I think it was specifically, I think it was Kenya, so it was, sub-Saharan Africa. The subject matter expert is somebody who's a grower or a seller in that region, or maybe a faculty member here at the university who has experience with growers and sellers in that region. These are individuals who are not on your team, but you should be talking to. And those are individuals that I can help connect you with, that you might struggle on your own to find those individuals. So please reach out to me and I will help you in any way that I possibly can. I also highly encourage you to submit your idea, no matter what shape it's in right now, into the Teams tool, because it will start to get eyes on it and you will get some feedback from other individuals who might be interested in joining your team. The first iteration of your idea is not going to be the one that's going to be best to submit. It's going to be that 5th, 6th, 10th iteration that your teammates have helped you work through. So getting it up and early is better for you than trying to scramble at the last minute and putting something together to submit. Last thing I'll say, just because it just popped into my head, is also to be clear that you can submit more than one idea. And you can be on more than one team. So I highly recommend that you put time and effort into doing a few ideas really well, rather than just throwing a bunch of things and hoping that something sticks. But if you do have 2 or 3 great ideas, you can submit multiple ideas into the challenge, and hopefully one of them will be picked to move forward. So with all of that, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for staying a little bit longer than our allotted time. If you have any questions, reach out to me and let me know. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Joel, for presenting tonight. I'm certain that Joel would be happy to, if you reached out to him as well, if you had any questions. I don't know, Joel, if you want to throw your email in there.
Yeah, I'll drop my email in there too.
If you want to reach out to Joel, I'm sure he would be happy to talk to you as well. So thank you so much. Have a great night.